So welcome everybody, my name is Paul Smyers and I'm a realtor in southwestern Virginia. I service the Shenandoah Valley in that area. I specialize in rural property and land and that sort of thing, recreation, farms. I love the rural area of Virginia and I've lived in rural life for much of my life and I enjoy it very much. I'm not a farmer and that sort of thing. I just like the countryside. I like the slow pace of life and a lot of beautiful things going on out in Virginia. There are lots of recreation land here and that's why I live here. So I want to talk today a little bit about the types of houses. Let's say you're a first-time buyer and you're going out to buy your first house. That's a really big thing for everybody, and a lot of people don't know how houses are built, or what they did say 30 years ago as opposed to what they do now, and how old homes. Sometimes people have a romantic idea. They say, I'd like to get that really old farmhouse, but they don't know they might be buying a whole lot of problems. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the types of homes that are out there. On the really, really elementary level, if you want to just have the absolute cheapest type of home, it's probably going to be something like a mobile home. Now, in the old days, mobile homes were really, really quite flimsy, but they had standards that developed over the 60s and 70s and over the 80s and whatever. And now there's a very different quality of what they call a mobile home, but there's still a lot of really old mobile homes out there that I talk about in some of my other videos. So that's one level. And let's say you buy a used one. The thing is, you're going to probably have to pay cash because the banks don't want to touch it. But on the other hand, they'll be pretty cheap, and there's some advantages by having a septic and well and driveway already there. If you buy a mobile home, you can kind of swap it out. You go a step up from there, you get into what they call a modular home. Now, modular homes have very high standards, and they're basically made in a factory conditions, and they have these big, huge warehouses, and they build these things, and they're controlled conditions, and they do all the wiring inside. They make it really, really strong. They have a really good procedure now for these things because it's a technology they've been developing for quite a long time, and they've got some pretty good ways of doing it. And then they bring this home to your house. It might be a double wide or two pieces, what they call a modular home. And then you have to prepare a completely good foundation for it, and a whole lot of preparation has to go into making this happen, even if it's what they call a modular home or mobile home, on the double wide to really large, substantial homes. Typically, a modular home, let's say a mobile home is maybe 10 to 12 to 15 feet wide, and some of them are pretty long actually. When you get into a modular, you think about the size of a home. Even a fairly small home, 20 feet by 30 feet is a 600 square foot platform. So if you have two of those, that's a 1,200 square foot house. Now, there's a lot of different stages where people can get a modular home that's set on a basement or not a basement and so on. Usually what they do is they set it on a concrete pad, and it's there, and it's really solid, and there's official specifications that have to be met for putting a home like that down in acreage. So now you get into some of the older homes. There are a lot of old homes in Virginia, historical homes. Now they come in various degrees. For example, if you find a home that's really, really old, let's say Virginia, let's say 200 years old, we're talking the 1800s. That's a pretty darn old home. And if it still exists after 200 years, it was built really well and taken care of, because otherwise it wouldn't be here. So, on the other hand, those types of homes, they might have belonged to colonial people or merchants and so on, big homes. They might be very, very expensive, and they might need a totally new wiring, or they might have had that done already, but which is very common. Sometimes if the home has been that long and lived in and changed hands a number of times, then most likely there's a good chance that the wiring was upgraded. But there are other things, such as the windows, that old windows leak like crazy, and I know somebody right now who had a historical home and very, very expensive to upgrade. Now, she went through a long process legally to arrange all the things, but she got some kind of grant with the town that says, okay, we'd like to restore this beautiful home, and there's some grant money here, and they end up giving there's over $40,000 worth of improvements that was done by a town. But it took a lot of pulling strings and arranging documentation and inspections to make it happen. So those are the kind of homes you get, these really old homes. The common homes in the old days, the cheap homes, so again, they were the modulars, but then you get a step up from that, and they were basically like one really great type of home that you can buy now is the brick ranch. They don't really build very good brick ranches anymore. I mean, when if you see one that's really solid, they were the 60s, the 50s, the 60s. They took their time and they built some really good homes, and they last a long time. If a home is still going strong and looks good after 50, 60 years, it's a good design. So brick ranches are really a great house, and they tend to be tighter than the two-story farmhouse. Like I was saying, in the old days, what they did for insulation was pretty pathetic, actually. So one of the things that you get a problem with is you buy a really old home, it may need a total renew of the insulation inside, because and then the walls may have been built with plaster and lath as opposed to what's now done with sheetrock. Sheetrock is a much faster and easier construction because you basically just will build a frame and then you throw some insulation in there and you slap a big board on a sheetrock board and then you paint over and that's done. But in the old days, building a wall was a very much more complicated procedure. Inside some of these old homes are some incredibly really strong beams, and they might be plastered and lathed over with this really strong material. So that's the kind of house, if you get one of those, they're really hard to expand and improve in any way, because you get this, the walls are so strong and hard and everything. Now, there's a lot of homes that are built that are, when they got into the sheetrock age, that like you can get a ranch house is easy because they're flat, they're all on one level, and that's another thing that, you know, if you have stairways in a home, it can cause some various issues, especially in older homes. They might even like sag a little bit or something like that. And then in the old days, I've been in a house that the stairway was so narrow as opposed to the standards that we have now. So a multi-level room heat and multi-room house might be harder to heat, whereas you have an open type of structure inside, the heat distributes pretty evenly, especially if you have something like a wood stove. So there's a lot of different kinds of houses out there, and before you buy one, it's not just a 2-bedroom, 3-bath or whatever. It's the type of house, the type of construction. There's certain kinds of houses that were built in the 40s and 30s that they really, honestly, that especially like the late 1800s, early 1900s, you get into what they call the Victorians. Some of them are really, really articulate. They have a beautiful curved glass. Some of them have really fancy little tower things on them and all kinds of ornate designs in the outside. And they're a nightmare to paint and take care of because water gets under there and frost, and then you got all this boards that get. So if you buy an older home, see if it's already had maintenance. Sometimes what they do is they'll like slap a whole bunch of vinyl siding over the top of some of those types of homes to cover them up. So okay, I can't deal with the boards anymore. Just cover it up with vinyl, and it can be a good job or a bad job depending. So if you buy a home, think, is it original? How much has it been modified? Does it need electrical work? Is it old-fashioned? Did it have lead paint long ago before 1978? Is it a structure that works for your lifestyle? Is the way the interior design? Is there a flow for your lifestyle? If you're a little older, you don't want to have to go up and down stairs all the time. So you want your laundry on the same floor as your home and your bedroom. The same with the bathroom. You don't want to be traipsing up and down. So there's serious considerations when you buy a home beyond what the immediate floor plan is, this type of architecture. Now, I'm not a big fan of some of the modern housing, honestly. They just use cheap materials. They build these huge McMansions, and they're hard to heat, and they're very expensive and they're just not the kind of place that I would like to live. And I know people who live in them, and they couldn't pay me to live there. So even though it's a really big house, it's no thank you. So a smaller house is easier to maintain. It has less cost overall. You're probably going to pay less taxes on it. If you can live efficiently, if you don't need all that space, why heat it and cool it and all that? So There's homes that you can add on fairly easily, and then there's homes that you can't. A log cabin, oh, that's great. You can get these log cabin kits, and I've seen some of them. Boy, if you build a log cabin with big, huge logs like that, I mean, don't forget about trying to add on to it. I mean, that's the way it's going to be. So they're appropriate in certain situations if you really know what the hell you want. Excuse my language, but a log cabin has like all these heavy, it's just a very different kind of thing to deal with inside architecturally. Same way with post and beam houses. Post and beam houses from the 1800s, 1900s, if you find one, they're actually very, very well made. And I've seen some that I lived in one time where we gutted it and we exposed all the beams and had sheetrock between, and it was really a very, very amazing, delightful place to live. But it took a lot of work to make it that way. So old houses are quaint, but they might come with some problems. And if they've been around a long time and they're still structurally sound, that means that probably it's a good home, and if it's not sagging and so on. So I see that I've been making this video now for about 11 minutes. I don't want to make them too long, so come back for some of the other content, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I try to answer people. I can be a real estate scout for you. I can look for people on their behalf. I can negotiate, and I also do area photography for clients in this region. So again, thanks for listening, and I appreciate all the feedback, and like and share, and hope to see you in some of my other videos.